For years, young men vanished from the streets of London. Some were never reported missing. Others simply seemed to disappear without a trace. No one suspected that the answers lay inside a small flat occupied by a quiet, unassuming man named Dennis Nilsen. What police would eventually discover inside that apartment would become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in British history. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at the life, crimes, and capture of Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen was a Scottish serial killer and necrophile who unalived at least 12 young men and boys in London between 1978 and 1983. He was known as the Maxwell Hill Murderer. He lured vulnerable and often homeless individuals to his home, strangled them and kept their bodies for companionship before dismembering them. The method that Nilsen used was to lure young men to his North London flats in Melrose Avenue and later Cranley Gardens in London, where offers of food and alcohol. His victims were mostly gay men or homeless individuals, and he was convicted of 6 unalivings and 2 attempted unalivings in 1983. He was caught after human remains, which he had been flushing down the toilet, had blocked the drains of his Maxwell Hill flat in London. Nilsen was born on the 23rd of November 1945 in Fraserburgh, Aberdeenshire in Scotland. Few could imagine he would go on to become one of Britain's most notorious serial killers. He was the second of 3 children. His father served in the military and was often not around much, and his parents' marriage ended when he was a kid. He was close to his grandfather, and when he died, Nilsen was really affected by it. And in his teenage years, Nilsen was always described as quiet and kept to himself. He often said he felt lonely, and because he was homosexual, he struggled with it because it wasn't as accepted back in those days. Him struggling with loneliness doesn't excuse what he did, and my heart goes out to all the people who were affected by Nilsen's actions. After leaving school, he joined the army, in the British Army Catering Corps in 1961, serving for 11 years as a cook, where he acquired butchery skills. After leaving the army in 1972, he moved to London and worked different jobs, including briefly as a Metropolitan Police officer. After resigning from the police in late 1973, Nilsen spent a brief period working as a security guard. In May 1974, he successfully applied to join the civil service, where he would remain employed for the next 9 years until his arrest in February 1983. He worked as a clerk in the civil service and employment interviewer for the Manpower Services Commission. His duties for his job involved interviewing members of the public, managing benefit and recruitment files, and helping unemployed people find work. He was known by colleagues as a highly competent, efficient, but argumentative worker who became heavily involved as a union shop steward. He spent most of his civil service career at the Denmark Street Job Centre near Soho in central London, before being transferred to the Kentish Town Job Centre in 1981. Nilsen was actively working as a civil servant throughout the entirety of his killing spree from 1978 to 1983. His job gave him regular contact with vulnerable, unemployed and displaced young men, whom he would occasionally interact with outside of work or target in the local area. He would eventually lure them back to his flat. While he did not actively kidnap men directly from his desk, the job gave him an intimate understanding of the vulnerabilities of the young transient population in London at the time. He used the social skills he got from the job, presenting himself as a helpful, authoritative, yet sympathetic figure to easily strike up conversations with lonely young men in nearby pubs, offering them free alcohol, food, and a warm place to stay. Nilsen used a highly consistent, calculated method to unalive his victims, relying on alcohol, isolation, and nighttime attacks to overpower them. He did not use weapons, instead opting for methods that cause minimal noise. The individuals were provided with large quantities of alcohol. He waited until they were unconscious or in a state where they could not defend themselves before proceeding with the attacks. The methods used in the attacks were intended to be quiet and effective, avoiding the use of traditional weapons to ensure the neighbours remained unaware of the events occurring within the flat. The most frequent cause of death was strangulation. The deaths were caused by restricting airflow and blood flow to the brain by strangulation. In instances where the initial attempt did not immediately result in death, he utilised a secondary physical means to ensure the victims were fully silenced, including drowning them in the bathroom. Because the victims were targeted in a state of deep intoxication, there were rarely signs of a struggle. This lack of disturbance allowed the crimes to go undetected by neighbours and co-workers for several years. Nilsen was caught out because his method of destroying evidence completely blocked the drainage system of his building. Dennis Nilsen's arrest happened on February the 9th, 1983, and was sudden and undeniable and unmarked by his immediate casual confession. It occurred right outside his home as he returned from a normal day at his civil service job. Police officers from Hornsey Police Station, led by Detectives Chief Inspector Peter J., waited outside Nilsen's home in 23 Cranley Gardens in London. They set up a stakeout to catch Nilsen as he returned from his shift at the Kentish Town Job Centre. At approximately 5:50 p.m, Nilsen walked up to the house and Detective J and two officers approached him. They identified themselves and stated that they were investigating a severe blockage in the building's drains. Nilsen remained entirely calm. He unlocked the communal front door and led the officers up the stairs to his top floor flat. As soon as the door opened, the officers were hit by a thick, putrid smell of rotting flesh. Nilsen attempted to deflect, claiming the odour was just from his dog. However, DCIJ looked him in the eye and said, "Don't mess us around," and asked where is the rest of the body. Nilsen paused and looked at the floor, and he said to them, "In the wardrobe and the tea chest," and showed them. Nilsen walked over to the wardrobe and a plastic tea chest in his living room area. Inside, police discovered several large black plastic bag liners. Where they opened them, they revealed two severed human heads, a torso, and an assorted limbs. Nilsen was immediately read his rights and placed under arrest. As he was being led out of the building, he looked at his beloved dog and requested that the police look after her. While being driven to Hornsey police station in the back of a police car, DCIJ assumed they were dealing with a single unaliver and asked Nilsen if the remains belonged to one person or two. Nilsen calmly replied there were 15 or 16 and he had been committing crimes since 1978. The officers were completely stunned. They realised they were not dealing with a localised domestic dispute, but rather one of the most prolific serial killers in British history. By the time they reached the station, Nilsen was fully cooperative, requesting a cup of tea and a cigarette before giving a long multi-day confession. So he gave a confession for quite a few days, explaining everything, what he'd done and where all the bodies were. His colleagues at the Kentish Town Job Centre were utterly shocked, as he had been a highly visible and vocal figure in the office. He was known as a model worker. To his colleagues, Nilsen was an efficient, hard-working and intelligent civil servant. He was a staunch trade union shop steward who aggressively fought for the rights of junior staff, making him a prominent presence in the workplace. The most disturbing realisation for his co-workers involved his cooking. Nilsen frequently brought large pots of homemade traditional curries into the office to share with staff. After his arrest, it had been revealed that he had been boiling the remains of his victims in large cooking pots to dispose of them. Horrified colleagues were left wondering about the kitchenware he had used to prepare their office lunches. In hindsight, co-workers recalled weird situations where he was sometimes known to have a strange, unpleasant odour on his clothes, which they assumed was from his dog or bad hygiene, but was actually the smell of decaying bodies. And he frequently complained of being exhausted, which he blamed on his intense union work rather than his gruesome nighttime activities. Nilsen's trial at the Central Criminal Court, in other words the Old Bailey, began on the 24th of October 1983. It was a highly sensationalised and macabre event that centred not on whether he killed the victims, but on his mental state while doing so. Because many of his victims, 15 of his victims confessed, could not be found. The ones he confessed to could not be found or identified. Nilsen was tried on a select sample of 6 counts of unaliving and 2 counts of attempted unaliving. He entered a plea of not guilty to unaliving anyone, but guilty to manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. He acknowledged that he had killed the men, but his defence team argued that severe mental defect meant he could not fully control his actions, which would protect him from a mandatory life sentence. The trial quickly transformed into a complex debate between prominent forensic psychiatrists. The psychiatrists from the defence team argued that Nilsen suffered from a combination of schizoid, borderline and narcissistic personality disorders, labelling it as an unspecified personality disorder. They claimed this made him incapable of premeditated intent. The psychiatrist from the Crown Prosecution Service, Dr. Paul Bowden, strongly countered this. He testified that while Nilsen was manipulative and abnormal, he remained entirely cognizant of and legally responsible for his horrific actions. He noted that Nilsen meticulously covered his tracks, showing deliberate control. The courtroom was subjected to deeply unsettling physical evidence and harrowing testimonies. The prosecution presented photographs of the crime scenes, the chopping board Nilsen used to dissect bodies, and the actual cooking pot he used to boil skulls and limbs. The most damaging blow to Nilsen's defence came from three men who had survived his attacks: Paul Nobbs, Douglas Stewart, and Cole Stottle. They provided vivid accounts of waking up to Nilsen actively trying to strangle them. Despite the defence trying to undermine their credibility by bringing up their sexual encounters, their survival stories proved Nilsen acted with clear conscious intent. The heavy psychiatric jargon heavily perplexed the jury, prompting the trial judge, Mr. Justice Croom Johnson, to explicitly instruct them during his summing up that a mind can be evil without being abnormal. The jury retired on the 3rd of November 1983, but failed to reach an unanimous decision. The following day, November 4th, the judge permitted a majority verdict. The judge found Nilsen guilty on all counts of unaliving to all the charges. He was handed life sentences with a recommendation to serve a minimum of 25 years. This was subsequently upgraded to a whole life order in 1994 and meant he died in prison on May the 12th, 2018, due to a pulmonary embolism. His actions were detailed in the biography Killing for Company by Brian Masters and portrayed in the TV drama Des. He wasn't a very nice man, as you can tell. Unbelievable what went through his head and why he done that. It just goes to show people come across normal, but you never know what someone's really like. But thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I'm still new in this true crime thing, so I'm thanks for everyone's support. It really means a lot, and please like and subscribe to my content if you want to see more. Then and also name some cases if you want some cases read out or researched, and I'll do a video on them. Then do that as well. But thanks everyone, and have a nice evening. Good night.